All right, well, thank you for being here this morning. We're super excited to present to you our assessment process and present it in an affordable way that everyone can perform it. My name is Eric Wogley, president of KPI. I'll introduce the boys here in a second. Quick background of our story. We were founded in October of 2020, right in the middle of COVID. We're located in Northern California in the Bay Area, Santa Clara County, which had the strictest COVID restrictions ever. So we had quite an interesting start to our business. We train over 300 athletes. The vast majority is baseball. A ton of tech integrations. We use force plates, Blast, armcare.com, HitTrax. All right, pretty much all the bells and whistles. So we're 100% objective and data-based in our facility. And everything we do is tracked. Every swing the boys take, every throws they make is tracked. Real quick introduction of who we have here on stage. Dan Kabulian, he's our director of strength. Chase Spivey's our director of hitting. Justin Sanders is our director of pitching. We have John Moscott from Blast Motion here, Matt Unthank from armcare.com, and then Gary Russo from Uplift AI, which is a motion capture system. So if you guys can get on your phone right now and just vote, how much of your practice, training, or programming is done using tech? So go through those options, make sure you pick one option, then submit, and you'll see it live populate on the screen as you do that. Take about another 10 seconds or so, let you get your votes in. Well, it seems like there's at least some level of tech integration in what you do, and then that's what we're going to present today, how to integrate tech into your assessments, how to individualize training and programming, and then how to do it in an affordable way. Second question here, how much do you use an assessment to individualize your practice or training? Whether you're a facility, whether you're a team, how much do you use an assessment to individualize training? All right, very cool. So it seems like, again, we're using some base level of assessment. Hopefully today will provide you a little bit more structure and an in-depth look at how to integrate assessments more and more to individualize what you do. All right, a couple nuggets of kind of our philosophy on things, and then we'll expand on this as the presentation goes. But if you're not using technology to drive your program, you're relying on opinions to determine your job status and player's career. We always try to look at what's at stake at KPI. You know, a lot of the athletes that train with us are trying to get to the Division I or professional levels. There's a ton at stake, and we don't want our opinions to drive that process. We want objective data to drive that process. And then last little nugget here before we kind of dive in. If you're not using assessment to individualize training, you're cheating many of your players out of what they need. We're going to dive into this concept a little bit as we go. But basically, players have unique needs. They need to be assessed, and they need to have their individual needs met. All right, the way we do things at KPI, and the presentation will be presented in this structure in each one of these assessments, is first thing we always do is we assess the problem. The second thing we do is we solve the problem, we connect the dots between skills, strength, and other areas, and then we validate the programming with data. And that's kind of how we'll present each one of these assessments. All right, first up is Blast. Blast is a bat sensor. Many of you probably know about it. Don't have to go too deep into what it is. All right, what are the biggest problems you face developing hitters? So go ahead and vote on your phone. Is it swing and miss? Is it high fly balls? Is it rollover ground balls? Or is it weak pop-ups the other way? What are the biggest problems you have developing hitters? Nice, look like rollover ground balls is going to be where we start. Swings and misses. All right, high fly balls, not a problem. We like that. All right. So John's going to hop in right now, and he's going to discuss how Blast can actually solve all these problems. He's going to start with what you've identified as the biggest problem, rollover ground balls. And he's going to talk about how the different Blast metrics can kind of help you solve those issues.
Yeah, thanks, Eric, and thanks for having me up here. So we're going to talk a little bit about all four of these things, a little bit about Blast, how KPI uses it, and addressing some of these issues. So when you're dealing with, obviously, this issue, rollover ground balls, we tend to look towards early connection. And when Blast assesses early connection, to keep it very simple for you guys, it's really where your hands are and where the barrel is in relationship to your spine. So everybody has a different batting stance. Everybody starts in a different place. But there is one position that hitters get to, what some people call it the launch position, some people call it the ready position. There is an optimal position. And that's when the barrel of the bat is at 90 degrees in relationship to your spine. So when the barrel starts to climb forward and go upright in relation to your spine, it's a much more difficult path to the ball as a hitter to go from point A to point B being contact, and it's a longer path, therefore there's more movement, and you tend to see players rolling over, specifically when their hands start to climb forward or get too flat, right? Hitters are creating holes for themselves when they start in those suboptimal positions. And early connection tells a very, very clear story of from where you start to where you finish. It's a full process, the swing, and it translates to the result, which ends up being, a weak ground ball, potentially a weak pop fly. We'll talk about that in a moment, but that early connection is very important for where you start as a baseline as a hitter. Our measurement is 90 degrees. We'd love you again to be at 90 degrees. That's where we estimate the best are. And we have hundreds of millions of swings to back that up. So I think the second one that we saw was swing and miss. Now, what I just talked about, early connection, has a very, very close correlation with swing and miss. And we talk about plane efficiency being very, very closely related to early connection and then therefore swing and miss. So at the highest levels of the game, right, the major league level all the way down to the collegiate level, our most consistent hitters with the highest batting averages have the highest on-plane efficiencies. What does that mean to you guys? It means who's in the zone the longest and has the most optimal path to the ball, right? Who's not wasting any movement as they move to the baseball? Who is making sure that they're on plane earliest, right? If it takes you a long time to get on plane with a particular pitch, it's going to be very difficult to hit when the velocity increases and the breaking balls get better. So if you can get on plane early, that score is obviously going to be higher for you. You're going to be closer to that number of 100%. Our target, guys, you shouldn't be shooting for 100%, right? Your players should strive to be above 70% consistently, and you guys will see as coaches large increases in their consistency as hitters, because ultimately that's what you can control, the consistency at which they hit the ball hard. Swing and miss, on-plane efficiency. We'll talk about bat speed next, right? Weak pop-ups. I think bat speed is extremely important, right? And KPI does a great job of assessing all of these in different variations. I know they'll talk about that, but with bat speed, you guys want to create as much strength as possible. The harder you swing, the harder you hit the ball, the better the chance is for you as a hitter to have success, right? You put the pressure on the defense, you hit the ball harder, right? You're giving yourself the best chance. And bat speed is directly correlated to strength, right? Overload and underload training. You want to work on that so that the bat isn't getting pushed back as they go through the zone. I know that sounds cliche and very, very easy, but bat speed's really important. It's really, really important in the development process. There's a prerequisite for a guy to go play college baseball, right? You have to hit certain thresholds. It's kind of like pitching velocity. You've got to get your foot in the door with bat speed, because if you're not swinging the bat hard enough, you're not going to be looked at. And then we can talk about high fly balls. And I know that this is a major priority at KPI, and it's incredible how important and how quickly a player's approach can change with their attack angle. So what I know KPI does is they take hitters in and they assess the attack angle first, because if you're taking a bad angle to the ball, no matter how good your swing is, every pitch is coming in at a negative angle. Every pitch, right? Mounds are sloped down, gravity's pushing the ball down, you're getting the ball coming in downhill. As a hitter, you want to match the plane of the incoming pitch, right? So if it's negative, you want to be positive. And I'll tell you right now that the majority of pitches, whether it be a fastball or a breaking ball, are coming in between a -6 and a -16 degrees. So you want to be between that 6 and 16 degree window to consistently have the most success as a hitter. Now, you guys would be shocked if you threw a blast sensor on how many guys are outside of that window consistently. And if you can get in that window, which is very, very easy, it's the easiest thing to fix. You don't have to change mechanics. It's a mindset and some cueing. You can change that and get them in that window consistently. immediate results for your hitters.
Awesome. Really appreciate that, John. We've been working with Blast for, 5-6 years, even before John was there. And it's an incredible product. It's $100. We highly recommend it. We've built our entire hitting system around it. Chase is going to talk a little bit about how we connect the dots with the Blast metrics to our physical screen and our hitting system. Any follow-up on this, definitely let us know, and we can kind of dive a little deeper into our hitting system.
Yeah, I think the first thing is like, what we want to do first is we want to understand the machine that's in front of us, right? And understand that, like, if I'm going to ask a hitter to do something, I need to know that they have the capability to do it, right? So when we're talking about on-plane efficiency, like how long I'm in the zone, how early I get in the zone, I need to know shoulder mobility, right? Like especially if you have previous injury, if I'm going to get my barrel in the slot so I can get my barrel on plane early, right? I need to know they have the mobility to do that. That's very simple, right? But Dan does a great job doing a physical assessment to tie that in, so that I know if I'm working on trying to get them in the zone early, that they have the capability to do that. From an attack angle standpoint, right? The easiest thing is if I don't have any range of motion in my hip on my backside, right? The first thing that I'll run into is I'm just gonna run out of room and dive. And when I dive, then my barrel's gonna be steep in the zone, right? And we can work on, like, hey, stay back, stay back, stay back. But if they don't have the range of motion for it, stay back doesn't mean anything to them, right? And so then we have to then adjust the way that we coach them. And if my barrel's coming steep in the zone, I'm gonna hit ground balls, I'm gonna roll over a bunch, right? I'm gonna cut underneath, get these weak little opposite field pop-ups. And so it's important to understand if the hitter that's in front of you has the capability to actually do what you're asking of them. So when we go into early connection, we're talking about bat tilt, like where my bat's at before I accelerate. We want to talk about T-spine. And so what we look at is, like, we know as a left-handed hitter that it's going to be really easy for me to rotate right, but I will lose mobility to the other side, which means I'm going to compensate and use my hands if I don't work on my ability to actually get that scap load, so then I can get the early connection down to get my barrel in the zone early. It's not crazy complicated, right? But it's just making sure that, again, like, if my hands stay, and you'll see this a lot with young kids, right? Is my hands stay straight up in the air, they get away from my body. It's easy for me to rotate this way, barrel just dumps, and then I'm just swinging up or missing all the time, right? So it's important, again, shoulder mobility for on plane, hip range of motion for attacking. Like, do I actually understand what I need to do there? T-spine. And then the last thing is for bat speed, and this is pretty simple, right? A lot of times it's just overall strength. Like, am I strong enough? You know, we know that the faster I swing the bat, the harder I can hit the ball. It's not that straightforward, as we all know, right? But it's about, like, especially with younger kids, can you get stronger just from an output standpoint so then I can hit the ball harder? It's not that crazy, but we know it's important at a young level, especially as they get recruited as they go up.
Awesome. Thank you, Chase. If there's one thing to take out of this presentation, it really is connecting the dots. It doesn't matter if you collect data. It doesn't matter if you have Blast. It doesn't matter if you do a physical assessment if you don't use it to program and kind of tie the different areas together. All right, Gary's going to talk a little bit about uplift, motion capture, and how uplift can validate this approach. So gathering an assessment, trying to solve the problem, connecting the dots, and how do you know it's working? So uplift can kind of come in and help solve that issue.
Yeah, thanks, Eric, and thanks for having us up here and for the partnership. For those that don't know, Uplift, we're a 2-camera 3D motion capture solution used by over a third of major league teams currently off the field to complement what they do on the field and bring access to academies, colleges, and youth organizations that want to have 3D markerless motion capture. We can help start to validate some of the things you're using from other tech by just providing a full picture of how the body's moving through space from head to toe. So when we talk about rotational acceleration, we're giving you the kinematic sequence. So the pelvis, the torso, and the lead arm. How is the athlete actually sequencing? How fast are they rotating? In what order are they using their body to really start to look at efficiency? I know Blast preaches rotational acceleration is kind of the ceiling for the athlete. When you look at high-level athletes, they sequence very, very well. They really organize well. And I used it on a webinar. I'll say it again, like, consistency lies within efficiency. So the more efficient you are, the more consistent you're going to be as a hitter. So really understanding how the body's moving to then impact the bat. You now have the ability to have all these tools at your disposal to quantify as much as you want, which is exciting. Bat speed, that's really coming down to the speed too. When you look at guys that have high bat speeds, they have their body moves very fast. That's how they get high bat speed. where acceleration is what's moving when in the body. Bat speed is just pure speed. You could have some guys that, you know, might be lead arm dominant in their swing and might not sequence very well that still have really high bat speeds. They're going to potentially struggle at the higher levels if they're not as efficient as some of the other athletes. Attack angle, Chase already kind of mentioned shoulder pelvis tilt. You know, how is your body moving relative to your pelvis, relative to your lower half? How is that athlete moving through space as he rotates? Is he collapsing as he's, you know, approaching the baseball, or is he really stable and sturdy? We're able to provide that. And then your early connection, the posture and torso tilt, same thing. You now have the body to match the bat data to really understand that full picture of how that hitter's moving, where he might need to, you know, program with Dan to assess some of these things, if it's a stability issue or a strength issue, and really just help you understand, you know, as a coach, how can we quantify the body and then use that data in concert with Blast or other tools to, you know, give the athlete as an objective picture as possible for where they're at.
Awesome. Appreciate it, Gary. We've been with Uplift about 5 months or so. It's been a huge tool for us this winter as we've had a lot of the pro guys in and welcomed the college guys back. So really kind of diving in and getting really deep under the hood and getting pretty granular with the approach on training them. Uplift has been a very, very valuable solution for us. All right, we're going to get into the arm care stuff, okay? So Matt's here from armcare.com. He's going to be commenting a little bit how their solutions can kind of help solve some of these problems. First thing, though, let's kind of see where you identify your biggest issues with pitchers. So if you can get back on your phone, what are the biggest problems you face keeping pitchers healthy? Is it workload? Is it working with strength and conditioning? Is it individual physical assessments? Or is it arm care programming and training? Take about another 10 seconds or so here, get your votes in. All right, looks like workload is the biggest pain point. So Matt's going to dive in there first, talk about how the armcare.com system, the dynamometer, their algorithms, their app can kind of help solve some of these problems, starting with workload.
Yeah, absolutely. So just so we're all on the same page, this is called a dynamometer. It's a handheld tool. Player is going to wear this on their wrist. So one of the misconceptions is people think they're going to put this on their arm and going to throw with it. Okay? This is not for throwing. This is for measuring the body's ability to produce force. So we take a player through a strength assessment where they wear it on their wrist, and we look at their ability to internally rotate, externally rotate, elevate, and we also look at their grip strength, or pinch strength. So that pairs with the mobile app and delivers that data to you as a coach through a training platform. We call it our coaches portal. So what do we do with that data? Well, obviously workload was the number one thing you guys are looking at. So because we're getting interactive, I'll ask you a couple questions and just give me a thumbs up or thumbs down. So if we have a player who is fatigued, what should we do to intensity? Should we increase it or decrease it? It's not a trick question. If we got a player's fatigue, we want to bring their intensity down. Okay. The next question is, we have a player who just had a heavy workload. Okay, they're in a recovery mode. Do we need to increase or decrease the intensity? This would be decrease. Again, not a trick question. If we got a guy in a recovery mode, we need to bring their intensity down. And the third question is, if we have a weak player, okay, they have a weak arm, do we need to increase or decrease the intensity? We need to increase it. So we've got a player, let's say we got any athlete, they want to get bigger bench press, we're going to add more weight to it. We're going to add more volume. Okay, if we want to make a player stronger, we need to push them harder. So the problem is, without assessment, we do not know, do we need to increase or decrease those numbers or decrease those values? So having some strength measures allows us to make an educated decision on what do we need to do with that intensity to make sure we're hitting that player at the right point at the right time. So workloads absolutely can be able to make better decisions by using the strength data provided by the app. Second piece here, working with strength and conditioning. The problem with not knowing how a player is adapting to their workloads, it leaves it up to question, okay? And it's not just what you're doing in your training, but for a lot of these players, they're leaving you and they're going to go work with another strength coach. They're going to work in another sport. We're just joking about a guy who he was dialed in with his training here at KPI, but then he was going to hang out with his bros and doing bench and buy in the gym. Okay, all of that is going to change how that player adapts and how they perform. So we cannot create a generalized template to say, this is what we're going to do for your arm because that's what the best arms do. We need to have data to customize and make that training specific. So with strength measurements, we know if a player is weak or out of balance, and we can make changes to that player's training program, both in your capacity, but then we can also communicate with other coaches, with other strength professionals to say, hey, this player needs to throw, and we are putting him into greater imbalances with the training that they're taking on. So we can make better decisions on how can we customize that training program for that player. And the third piece, individualized assessments, and that really overlaps with how we're managing and monitoring our strength conditioning. But by creating individualized assessments, we can create a better and more customized training program, both with their workload and their strength conditioning plan. So we do a daily exam. Okay, it's just to get into some of the weeds of it. We have a big arm care exam. By big, it takes about 5 minutes. Then we look at the full profile of that kid's strength. Then we do a daily check-in. It's just a quick look at that kid's ability to produce force that day. So with those daily check-ins, we can look at trends, both acutely. So we'll look at strength assessment before and then after they throw. And we can look at how did strength change. So we know how fatiguing was that workload. Okay, that's a very important way that we can modify that player's training. And if we see a huge drop-off in strength, we know that first, the kid needs to get stronger so he can sustain that. But then we also know what is this player's ability and where do we need to be programming his workloads. But then we can also look at that over time. So we look at how does he perform right after he throws? How's the strength test look right after for the next day and for the day after that? And so when we talked about recovery, not all players are going to recover the same. There's so many factors that go into that recovery process. And by knowing how is strength returning back to that baseline, again, we can create individualized, customized training and modifying their workloads based on those individualized assessments. And then finally, our programming. Again, all of this is coming a bit together on how do we individualize and customize a player's programming based on how is their strength performing. So by looking at a kid's strength, we know how can we customize this individualized training and programming. It's pretty clear, increase, decrease intensity in response to a player's workload and their strength balance.
Awesome. Thank you, Matt. That was great. We are an official performance lab for armcare.com. We've been there about a year with them. A lot of people get scared of kind of implementing something like this. This is a $300 solution. You know, the sensor's low 200s and then getting the profile, so it's very affordable. People might be thinking like, how do I do this? Like I have a pitching staff of 15 guys. We run through about 60 pitchers a day on this, and over the course of the week, we'll have about 130 pitchers do this daily between the fresh exam and the primer. It is 100% doable. Probably the first 3-4 weeks we had the product, we had a coach assigned to that station, and now the boys just pull the app on their phone and they do it themselves because we've trained them. So this is a solution that you can implement into your program at any level, and it's been huge for us. We've rebuilt our whole arm care system around armcare.com. All right, Justin's going to talk a little bit how we connect the dots between our pitching systems and the arm care assessment.
Yeah, so within our facility, like Eric said, we have anywhere between 60 and 70 pitchers coming in on a daily basis. And so the first thing we have them do when they show up is go ahead and take that daily check-in just to make sure we understand how do they think their body feels, how much sleep did they get, and how does their arm feel that day. So we do that before they do any testing. And then we also print out a roster that sorts kind of in order what pitchers have for testing that day, as well as a schedule throughout the week of what they need to follow. Within the strength measurements category, we usually look at the fresh exam to get a judge of what should the athlete's workload for that day be, and whether we need to increase the intensity or reduce the intensity or make no changes at all. The biggest thing we have within the strength measurements is a strength leaderboard. So we post the athletes' arm scores weekly, and we've seen that incentivize a lot of them to take care of their arm care, recover, and it actually opens up a lot of conversations with these guys. Like he said, if we have athletes hit an upper body lift the day before they're supposed to have a bullpen, that will be shown within their strength measurements, and it opens up a line of communication. It also gives us kind of more objective feedback to talk to them rather than us just saying, we think this is the way it should go. The app actually does a lot of explaining that for us. Within the daily exams and primers, there's a big useful alert system. It categorizes under 3 things: watch, warning, and medical. The way we use that within our house is if an athlete pops up with a watch warning on any strength measurement, we usually make a reduction to throwing for that day, as well as alter arm care moving forward, and we tend to reevaluate the next time they come in. If it pops up as a warning, we usually refer to an in-house wellness coordinator to make sure that the arm care they're doing for that day is good enough, and then we usually reduce or even shut down the throwing for that day and reevaluate at a next session. And then if it pops up as a medical, we usually tend to refer out to PTs or doctors to kind of get a better dive into what's actually happening, and as well as shut them down from throwing completely. The individualized training aspect and the holistic full approach, I think we do a really good job within KPI. A big part of it is we literally share the same office. S&C coaches, wellness, pitching coaches, we all share the same office, and we all share this app. So having the ability to communicate with in-house on all aspects of their training to increase the arm care for them is a big part of what we do. So yeah.
Awesome job by Justin there. Kind of a subtle benefit of the armcare.com system is it gamifies arm care. Like we Justin said, we have a leaderboard of arm care, and we write on the whiteboard our top 20 guys and their arm care scores. And as a coach, you're trying to get players to engage in arm care, and that's not always the sexiest thing in the world. And to see on a daily basis, you go, yeah, my arm care score went up 5 points. Like that's pretty fantastic. So it's one of those things that they probably don't advertise very much, but it really happens where when you objectify and use data and the kids get into it, they're going to want to do better. And so it's a really key benefit for us. Gary's going to talk a little bit how Uplift can kind of validate some of this approach with pitching and arm care.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Going back to what I've been harping on from the hitting side, very similar in the pitching side, and I'm taking a lot of what I hear from brilliant sports scientists that I get to connect with on a daily basis. The kinematic sequence is really important when it comes to throwing and pitching. You don't want to put too much stress on the elbow or shoulder. There's research behind pitchers who don't sequence properly. They're going to have a higher risk for injury, given that amount of torque that they're putting on the arm to produce that force and produce that output of throwing velocity. So readiness monitoring, knowing if you have a guy that's not sequencing maybe as well as another pitcher, you probably want to give him a few more days in between as you're really starting to teach him how to sequence properly. Your pelvis and torso speeds from a strength measurement standpoint, if you notice these start to dip, you can start to monitor that and have a conversation with the athlete on their recovery. If they're not moving as fast or producing that same rate of force to produce that output again, that's a conversation the coach can have with the athlete using that objective data. And from a daily perspective, you can reassess if flagged on Arm Care Portal. You're able to whip out motion capture anytime you want, have the athlete throw, and then really have an understanding of how is the body moving, given the body's so important in any output players chasing, whether they want to throw really hard or swing really fast. They're going to have to use their body. They're going to have to use the ground to do so. So if the body's not moving properly, there's a potential injury risk, potential chance that he's not as recovered as he should be. And then just validating individually prescribed drills with individual training. How are we training the athlete? What drills are we prescribing the athlete? Whip out motion capture and put it on. I know a lot of teams do this. If we're giving you a med ball drill to improve your sequencing, why not see if the sequencing is improving when you're throwing the med ball against the wall? And if you're doing the drill improperly and you're still using your arms to generate force to throw the med ball against the wall, you're not really moving the needle in terms of your development. So being able to validate the actual drills you're doing to make sure that it's applying whatever you're trying to do with the athlete to their work is really important. See a lot of teams that want to measure that med ball stuff, measure anything they're having the athlete do to actually see, is this drill really working for the athlete? I know Blast is really big on that. You can do that with a Blast sensor as well. But from the pitching side, again, readiness monitoring, making sure the athlete's efficient. I think that's the beauty and evaluation too moving forward. On the eval side and assessment side, how does this athlete move? Are they efficient? And then from there, you can really decide what route you want to go, whether it's make them more efficient or simply the fun part of just getting them bigger and stronger with Dan.
Absolutely. And on that last point, something we do in-house is we give each pitcher individualized drills. So we'll use Uplift to analyze their mechanics. And then where we're at right now with it is the drills we prescribe them, we're also using Uplift for to make sure, again, that what we're prescribing them is actually working and it's accomplishing the solution we want them to get to. All right, what we're going to do right now is Dan's going to kind of go into our physical assessment. We have a very lengthy physical assessment. We kind of pick some low-hanging fruit here, some valuable, simple physical screens that you can do even as a field coach to quickly assess your players and how to use them. Dan's going to get through this probably a little quicker than he wants, just to make sure we get to the end of this. So if you can get on your phones right now, and this is actually going to be a word cloud, so just submit one quick word or one quick statement on there. What are some reasons you do not use a physical screen to assess your players? So if you don't use a physical screen to assess your players, whether it's a team or anything, maybe put some of those words in here right now. Make sure you press submit after you type that in. Time's getting a lot of votes. You guys are... Age, okay, that's a good one. All right, so hopefully as you guys put these in, hopefully we'll kind of address these bigs. Time, age, knowledge are huge, and I really think if you kind of see our assessment right now that Dan's going to present, we're going to be able to get through that and kind of show you like, hey, I can do this quickly and valuably and help my players. Real quick here, kind of put in some votes on what kind of warm-ups do you do, whether you're a facility, whether you're a team. Okay, do you do static traditional stretching? Do you do dynamic movement, activation type stretching? Do you mix those two worlds, or does each player have their own warm-up? All right, look, yeah, that's kind of what we expected, kind of a mix. It's the normal way now. I will say one thing, that if you're a team coach and then the players are going through the warm-up lines before practice or a game and they're all doing the same warm-up, someone's getting cheated. And so Dan's going to kind of present really quick, like, hey, here are some baseline things you can do to individualize this so players can get exactly what they need.
Cool. So one of the core premises of what we do at KPI is how you are built influences how you move, which then influences how you perform. As coaches, we want to start with performance, rollover ground balls, not throwing strikes, not effective curveball, whatever it may be. But if you have a player that consistently in-game falls back to old habits, there likely is a physical limitation that you can assess. And really quickly, we're going to start with the hips. You can literally throw them on a table or on the ground, and you're going to look at hip internal and external rotation. So you're just going to grab their knee, you're going to pull it up so it's a 90-degree angle. You're going to take their ankle and you're going to rotate it in and out. If you rotate their ankle away, that's internal rotation. You rotate their ankle in, that's external rotation. As a hitter, when I load into my swing, I'm going into internal, and as I drive my hips forward and rotate and swing and actually deliver the bat to the zone, external rotation. If you're limited in internal rotation, it's going to have a huge ripple effect downstream. So as Chase is talking about and John was talking about on Blast, you can say, okay, how you're built is causing this mechanical inefficiency. So no matter what drill I give you, if I don't address that hip mobility, then you're going to continue to see that pop up in games. They're going to swing down, they're going to lunge to the ball, they're not going to stay back, you're going to cue them to death, and they're going to get in games, and they're just going to fall back to old habits. So hip range of motion, super simple. There's a ton as far as what you can gather from that assessment beyond that. Happy to talk about it at our booth after. What we apply is, do you need to mobilize that joint, increase range of motion, increase the strength of that, or I'm sorry, the amount of range of motion you have, or do you need to activate the muscles that allow you to control that range of motion? Majority of our younger athletes, especially if they're before puberty, they need activation. They don't need to stretch. They have plenty of it. They have a ton of range of motion. They're hypermobile. They're loose jointed. They have no body control. You need to activate. Dynamic warm-ups, great. As you get older, we tend to lose this range of motion because we're always swinging to our dominant side. Our body will adapt to the stress, and then give us more of what we need, which is more external rotation, more rotation in the hips, more power. So we'll lose that internal rotation over time, very similar to the shoulder. I'll go again. So we can play this video. We can do a mobilization of the hip, specifically the groin and the glutes, or we can activate those muscles before we go and have a lesson, have practice. Here's a simple glute mobilization. You're gonna cross your leg. You're gonna lean until you feel stretched to the back of your hip. And then I'll go into another video as far as how does this play out on the field. If an athlete, you assess them and they physically just do not have the range of motion, that's how they are built. We cannot change it. Then we need to change the way they set up, whether it's on the mound or in the batter's box. In our experience, something we have had a ton of success with guys that lose internal rotation or just born with not very much of it, we allow them to turn their foot open. And so what that's doing, if you think about a squat, you see most kids squat, they like to go really wide and turn their toes out because that gives them more range of motion to be able to get down into their squat, get into their hinge, load their back hip. We can do the same thing on the mound. We can do the same thing in the batter's box. As a coach, as you evaluate somebody, you can see this when they just swing naturally. They sometimes adopt these positions. So again, connecting the dots between how you're built, how you move, how you perform. Move up the chain. Thoracic spine, moving through the middle, spinal engine, all those things. We hear those buzzwords. Here's a really quick and easy way that you can assess spine range of motion. You're gonna be on all fours. You're gonna have them sit back, have their butt all the way touching their heels. They're gonna put their hand on their ear and they're gonna rotate open. What we're typically gonna see is more range of motion towards their non-dominant side. So if I'm a right-handed hitter, right-handed pitcher, I'm always rotating to my left. I gain range of motion in that direction, especially over the course of the season. So as Chase was talking about, if I can't load and get into launch and rotates to my dominant side, I can't create space, I can't get that stretch that we want, I'm going to cheat with my hands. Whether I'm gonna drop them as an anchor, I'm gonna extend them with momentum and cast out and get disconnected. So if we don't address spine mobility and then we don't have a way to improve that, then we're gonna fall back to old habits in games and see those mechanical compensations on the field. So T-spine warm-up, you guys have probably all seen this exercise before. I think it's great. Obviously, it's on the floor. Sometimes some of these warm-up exercises aren't practical for the field. There are other options, but this is a very simple and straightforward one. We want our range of motion to come from the spine. If we see an increase in one direction, I'll simply tell an athlete, hey, whatever side you're limited on, double that up. I know it says 6 reps per side. You're gonna do 12 on the side that you feel more restricted on. And so, again, most common one we see is lack of rotation to their dominant side. As a pitcher, you're gonna see guys needing to create that hip-shoulder separation, stay stacked over the back hip. You're gonna see them use their arm action. They're gonna stab, they're gonna reach, they're gonna throw and use momentum of their arm swing, and it's gonna create inconsistencies as far as their ability to get to the release point and execute their pitches. So as a hitter, again, getting into scap load, getting into that launch, I've already kind of talked about this. And again, if you're seeing these things show up on the field, we're gonna need to physically assess and make sure that this is not a physical limitation.
But basic shoulder mobility, making sure the athlete has a proper range of motion. All right, if our athletes do this every day, if they don't pass that test, they're not allowed to throw that day until they pass it. We'll go through some mobility screening there. We are out of time. I'm gonna kind of skip ahead here. Gary, you wanna quickly touch on the mobility screen for uplift, like very quickly?
Very quickly, yeah. We're building a movement assessment to complement our skill development motion capture. So we obviously provide hitting and pitching reports currently. We're gonna build a movement assessment to allow coaches to understand that blend and that relationship between performance and skill development. So really excited to roll that out soon.
Awesome. I'm going to flip to the end, but basically, thanks to everyone for being here. Thanks for our staff, our social media guys running around here getting in your way. The KPI crew back home that's holding down the fort for us and all the athletes. Here's our contact information, okay? Go ahead and take a quick snapshot of that. We are at booth 749. If you want to go through an assessment, if you want to ask about one of these things, you want to ask about our physical screen, we're going to go there right now. We'll be there the rest of the day. Come by and see us, but we appreciate it. Thank you.